Okay, we are going to get started. I'll call the meeting to order at 10 a.m. of the West Coast Committee being held at the Ucluelet Council Chambers. I'd like to first acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the Nuu-chah-nulth territories. And I'd like to remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed through the Regional District website. I'm starting the meeting because we are going to do elections for the chairperson and vice chairperson of the committee. But before we do that, I think we'll just do a quick round of introductions. So I'll start with myself, Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services. Director McEwen.
Thank you. Marilyn McEwen, Mayor of Ucluelet.
Hi, Tom Steer, Councillor District at Tofino, appointed board member to the ACRD.
Veda Siga, Director for Area C, Long Beach.
Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer.
Daniel Sayan, the CAO for the ACRD.
And Kirsten, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Kirsten Johnson, representing the Tukwat Nation as the director.
And Dave, is that you? I can't see that far.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Dave Toval, Superintendent from Pacific Rim National Park Reserve and ex officio member.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so we're going to conduct the elections for chairperson first. So I'll call for nominations for chairperson of the West Coast Committee for 2025 a first time. Go ahead, Director Siga.
I'd like to nominate Tom Steer if he's willing to stay on as chair.
Okay. Tom, do you accept the nomination? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Call for nominations for a chairperson for a second time. Call for nominations a third time. There being no further nominations, I declare Director Steer as chair. And then for vice chairperson, I'll call for nominations for a first time. Go ahead, Director Stephen.
I'd like to nominate Mayor McEwen if she's willing to stay on as vice chair.
Do you accept?
I do accept. Thank you.
Okay. Call for nominations a second time. And finally, a third time. Okay. So there being no further nominations, I declare Director McEwen as vice chair for the West Coast Committee. So I will turn it over to you, Director Steer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. So I'll just look at the agenda here as presented. And the first thing we need to do is approve that agenda. So I'll move from the chair approval of the agenda. Thank you. Thank you, Veda, for that. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. We'll go to declarations and conflicts or perceived conflicts of interest, and I'll look around. Seeing none, we can move on from that. If I could get a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you for seconding. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. That brings us, where's Seth? I see, there he is. Hey, Seth, good to see you. We have a petitions, delegations, and presentations, and Seth, you know the drill. Thank you for coming out on a blustery day today.
Thank you, no problem. Thanks, Chair. I presented to you a number of. Now you're good. Sorry, it was red, so I thought it was on. Green is go. Thank you, Chair Steer, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to speak to you. I've spoken to you a number of times before. I've presented some PowerPoint slides outlining what the service comprises and what work we've done. I just have a few notes on sort of what last ends we've worked on tying up in the next few weeks before implementation of the service. As you might be aware, we are doing a media event on Friday, February 28th, which is the day before service begins by BC Transit. So service will be operated by yourselves through PWT on the 28th, and then beginning March 1st, service will be operated by BC Transit. Your MLA and our Provincial Health Minister, Josie Osborne, will be in attendance at the event, as well as the dignitaries such as yourselves will hopefully be able to attend. We're looking forward to the event. It will be at Ucluelet Secondary School, just up the road from here. That is one of the pieces that we have in motion, and we hope to invite the media. We've also captured some B-roll photography to provide to the provincial media. So we're hoping to make a bit of a splash with this event and really celebrate the accomplishment and the years of effort that yourselves and staff have put into establishing a transit system here on the West Coast. I just got an update in my email a few seconds ago on where the buses are located. We have 3 of the 5 buses in Port Alberni, one up the road here in Ucluelet, and one bus still in Campbell River, which is where they were being housed until they're transported down here for service implementation. We will have all 5 buses here for March 1st with the introduction of service. In terms of staffing and recruitment, we have one new driver joining us on March 1st to create a full complement of staff to be able to drive the buses and hopefully deliver 100% of service that has been established and agreed upon, which is about 7,500 annual hours. We are still in, or PWT, I should clarify, is still in the process of recruiting a local mechanic here on the West Coast. So if you have any friends that might be mechanics on the West Coast, please direct them to PWT. We'd be most excited to have them. In the interim, they have a mechanic, an exceptional mechanic who works out of Port Alberni, who does work on the Port Alberni transit system, who will be allocated to work on the West Coast 2 days a week until we can find a local mechanic. In terms of fares, we're excited that we're able to reduce the fares from $5.50 to $5 for the cash fare. All other fares will effectively be the same. We will be shifting from token transit to UMO transit, which is BC Transit's electronic fare vendor. We have established 3 local vendors, one of which is this very center. Another one is Tourism Ucluelet, as well as the Tofino District Office. We're currently, and I'm advocating strongly that we pursue the opportunity for another vendor in Tofino, so we have some more flexible hours available for purchasing fare products. We have the rider's guide, I understand here. The signage is being printed as we speak and will be delivered next week. The timeline, unfortunately, is a little bit tight, and we've worked hard to get the new channel translations on those signs to ensure they're accurate and to work with the respective First Nations to ensure that we have everything correct on those signs. And that's been a real work in progress and really speaks to the nature of the reconciliation journey as a journey. And Eddie and I continually talking about our learnings along the process. And that's been both refreshing and humbling, to be honest. Finally, I just want to touch on some of the technology that supports the user experience in terms of transit, and that's the Next Ride technology. Next Ride is not really what the user sees, but it's what we call the technology in the back end that enables us to see in real time where the buses are along their route. And if you want to get to Tofino from Ucluelet, you can say, where's my bus? And it will show it in real time where the bus is on an app like the Transit app, which is an app out of Montreal that's quite user friendly and enjoyable to use. That is queued up to be ready and functional on March 1st, but the timelines are quite short, so there might be a lag of a few days. Google Maps, unfortunately, has quite a bit more validating that they require in terms of bringing on a new transit system. So there's a delay of several months typically before we have the data and they validate it before they bring it on. So we'll have apps like the Transit app available pretty close to March 1st or hopefully March 1st. There will almost certainly be a few months before we can bring the full functionality on Google Maps to be able to give directions on transit there. That's everything I wanted to say, but I'm more than happy through Chair Steer to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Seth. It's really good to hear that this is moving forward, and I'd like to congratulate everybody that has had their hands in working to get this up and operational. And I'm wondering, the only thing that I kind of flagged is the Google. And because it's an American-based company, is that going to be a problem in the future?
Through Chair Steer, thank you for the question. Certainly, we are continuing to learn and understand what the ramifications of the potential of what looks to be an imminent tariff war might be on our business operations model. I think that I've had a couple conversations on that topic today. we haven't fully unpacked all of the details in terms of our procurement processes. So we are cognizant and starting to evaluate this in terms of what this means for bus purchases and stuff. But we have those details already worked out for the West Coast Transit System, so that's not a concern in front of us here. But in terms of Google Maps, I would say it's not at this time an issue. We don't foresee that to be a problem.
Thank you.
You have your hand up, or you just Yeah, I don't think he does. Thank you, Seth. Once again, I'll just echo Veda's comments around congratulations. I look to our staff as well and the work they did to that interim service and the incredible, as I commented before, the incredible amount of work to take something from scratch when given direction that we wanted to continue that service and to create what, in essence, in the last year has provided an invaluable service to our communities. And now the partnership with BC Transit and those continual working collaborations, I think, is testament to the work of the West Coast and certainly to the staff of the ACRD. So I really wanted to give a shout out for sure. Just one quick little thing you had mentioned about looking for another vendor on the Tofino end of things. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, we actually have our Chamber of Commerce right here in the room, so there may be some conversations offline. And I'm just thinking of the Tourism Tofino office, which has great working hours. It may be one of those places, centralized places for vending, but you have some great resource right in the room here. So I'll leave it there, and I'll look to Marilyn. Sorry.
Yes, just want to echo Veda's comments that thank you very much to staff for all the hard work and to BC Transit for stepping up. And looking forward to February 28th for the official launch.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. I see your hand up there, Dave. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to echo everything as well. With the transition from the ACRD to the province, really want to do a shout out to Eddie for all of his work making this transition really smooth, and thank the province as well, or BC Transit for taking this on. As the bus route goes through multiple jurisdictions, it's not easy. So we really appreciate the level of communications and wish everyone best of luck and starting on March 1st. So thank you, Chair.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Do appreciate those comments. I'll look to if there is no other Kirsten, I see you back online there. If there is no other questions or comments, thank you, Seth. Appreciate you coming out. I know you're going to be here for the West Coast Committee Transit Group Working Group as well. So I'll see you later. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chair Steer, sorry, can I just interrupt? It's me.
Absolutely.
I think we skipped over adopting the minutes. Would you mind just going back? Thank you.
I thought we did, but once again.
It was Marilyn and me. Yeah. Oh.
We did that too. Okay. Thank you. Every day's a new day for me, so thank you for keeping me. Yeah. Woo. Was this a trick, Heather? Thank you. So I see no correspondence, so we can move into our agenda item 8, request for decisions, and we'll start off with the Millstream water system rate review. And I'm looking to staff to see who will be doing that. There we are. Eddie's he's coming up as I speak. Thanks, Eddie.
Yes, and thank you, Chair Steer. So the RFD we have before you is a rate increase for the Millstream water system. So staff are proposing that the West Coast Committee recommend to the ACRD Board of Directors to approve a water rate increase of $20 per quarter for the Millstream water system. And then also just a change in some language within the bylaw just to clean it up and make it consistent in Schedule A. So really, we haven't increased the water rates in the Millstream water system now since 2022. We increased them there by $20 a quarter. At that point, when we did bring that rate increase, we were looking for a larger rate increase, but it was denied, and we went with the $20 a quarter. And again, we are looking to increase these really to help with our system's revenue. We don't have a parcel tax for the Millstream water system within the system. So we currently rely only on these water rates So we have 43 single family residentials. We have 7 additional connections for a total of 50 paying connections, and we generate $56,000 annually to run the water system. So this is for the operations and for the capital plan, for any capital reserve money we want to put away. So we really need to boost this. When we brought the water meter plan to you in December, we also said that we would bring kind of an asset management plan update to this meeting. Staff have been working towards that, and I think that's a part of the 2025 overall plan, is to do a larger financial plan update with an asset management update, and the two will kind of tie together to look at what the long-term rates need to be in order to make the system sustainable long-term. This rate increase really helps us keep up with the inflationary costs that we've seen over the last few years. So it's really, well, it's not, I won't say a nominal increase. It is really just that inflationary increase to make things right. Operational costs, we saw in 2024, as communicated, we spent some time chasing a leak within the system. So that really drove up the staff time necessary to operate the system, which saw the cost come up. I think when we look at the costs of goods, the cost of materials, the cost of supplies to make water and maintain the system, everything has risen since we last increased the rates, and we really need to keep up with those rising costs. So I did communicate in the December meeting, we had located a leak within the system. So I'll just give a little bit of a background on that as well. So that leak was a fairly large leak in the Carn and Albion intersection there. It ended up we didn't have to do an emergency repair, and it cost us roughly $40,000. And I believe, Terry, that was paid for out of the Growing Communities Fund. So we didn't actually use the capital reserve monies to pay for that. We were able to kind of keep that capital reserve where it's at, currently roughly $175,000 entering 2025. So what that repaired was, we were able to do with that, we put another hydrant in the system, which was great. We put 4 valves and we upsized the line. So now when we look to do a future upgrade in the line, we have the correct valve size in place and we're ready to do that. So when we look towards the financial implications of this increase that has been proposed, I'm trying to see exactly what that generates. It's really that $20 per quarter is an additional $4,000 annually, which isn't a large amount of money when you talk about water systems and long-term sustainability. The asset management plan, we talked about doing an update to that, and the long-term financial plan. The 2019 asset management plan identified the need to invest $36,000 roughly annually into the capital reserve in order to meet the long-term renewal costs of the system. So that's where, as we work on with Terry's team on the long-term financial plan and the asset management plan, those two will kind of work together on what the contribution needs to be from the community to look at that long-term renewal sustainability of the system. With this one, it does support strategy 2.1 in there of the strategic plan. So advancing the development of the asset management program. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
You, Marilyn, push the green button. Yeah, I'll look to the board here to see the committee. Sorry, to see if there's any questions. I'm staring at Veda, but I suspect she may have one or two.
Yeah, as a resident of Millstream, I'm very interested in this. And I do know quite a bit about the history of the Millstream water system. And congratulations on keeping it going, because it was definitely at a point of being in a failure state when you took it on. And thank you so much for explaining how water meters can actually help us maintain the water system. Yeah, I did not get that concept at all. And in terms of the rate increase, I think given the cost of living increases, yeah, I think this is reasonable. And thank you very much for looking at the long-term sustainability of the system. Really appreciate it.
I may have missed it, but how many of these homes are on meters, if any?
Yes, and thank you for the question through the chair. We currently don't have any any of the connections within the system metered. So that is one of the issues when we look towards the future. It's one of the items that we think would benefit the community and the water system. We have submitted a grant application for the purchase, installation, and design of water meters within the system that we're waiting to hear back on. So that'd be a huge win for the system, and it's 100% funding. So it will cover all the planning, all the design, all the installation costs for the meters, and take it off the hands of the community members.
Wow, that's fantastic. I wish we had that program here. Thank you.
Great. I'll look up to the screen there, seeing no questions up there. Thank you, Eddie. Just a couple of questions, just for my own information. Vade has an extensive experience with the water system there. Of the 50 users, and thank you for the report. Very, very thorough. It answered all the questions. I'd have a question, then I'd finish the report, and it had been answered. The one I was curious about with the 50 users on the system, 43 single-family residential, and then there was 7 secondary uses, and I was unfamiliar with what those secondary uses were, just for my own information.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Steer. And so the secondary uses could be anything from another lot, a suite on the property. It could be an Airbnb. So whichever the reason being, but it's usually a suite on property.
Great, thank you. And then just one other, I was being ignorant in the true sense of the word about parcel tax and how they would. And in the options that were given to us in the end, the first recommendation is very clear. And then there was some conversations about the investigation of a parcel tax. And I'll look maybe to see if while I see Terry's about to hit the button, so I'll let Terry complete that. And then if there is a separate motion that may be necessary, I'll look to staff to see if that would be necessary.
Thank you. And our other 2 water systems, we do use a parcel tax model, but in those systems, there is lots that are not currently connected to the water system. So it does make sense to generate revenue in that way. In this service area, all the parcels within the boundaries are all connected. They're all single family residential. So we've never really seen a need. However, there has been some good discussion among staff. We've always done it as a user fee. There's some limitations for that for the homeowner. So if we were to continue to increase user fees, if they are unable to pay their user fees and they get transferred onto their taxes, they then lose the ability to defer their taxes. Whereas with a parcel tax, although it would be the same dollars generated for us as a regional district, they would then be able, if they qualified for the other areas of the property tax deferment program through the province, they would be able to defer. So we're definitely having that discussion as we think that there's going to be more increases coming, and thinking that maybe at that point we will implement the parcel tax. The existing bylaw does give us the authority to do it. We have just never actually exercised that authority. So there would be some discussion with the community and a mail out to let them know that we would be implementing a parcel tax in their area in 2026 if we decide to go that direction.
Great, thank you. That clarifies some of the questions that we're going to follow up. So excellent, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, Veda, would you like? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah. So Marilyn did move the motion on the table that the West Coast Committee recommend that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve amendments to the bylaw F11144 Millstream Water Local Service Area Rates and Regulations 2019 to include a water rate increase of $20 per quarter effective April 1st, 2025, and change the language in Part 1 of Schedule A to be consistent in communicating charges per quarter, seconded by Veda. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Great. Next up onto our agenda, we have a request for decisions on our annual review of the West Coast Committee Terms of Reference. And I'm looking over to Heather because I figured she'd be the one talking on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is just an annual review for each of our committees. We review the terms of reference. I've reviewed them. I'm not recommending any changes for this committee, so it's presented there for your consideration.
Thank you. Veda, go ahead.
I can move that the West Coast Committee reconfirm their terms of reference for 2025 as presented.
I'll second.
Seconded. And before I call the vote, I just had, yeah, I see that Dave's hand up there. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just had 2 questions about the terms of reference. 2.1 refers to the Long Beach bike path, which I don't believe there is an entity. I don't know if we're referring to the multi-jurisdictional, multi-use path that we have going through multiple jurisdictions. So I don't know if we want to clarify that, or if the committee is okay with referencing a Long Beach bike path. And then my second comment is just a comment on 3.1. Under ex officio, Pacific Rim National Park is a reserve, so it's a national park reserve because there's still unresolved land claims by multiple First Nations. So if we can add reserve to the official title of Pacific Rim National Park Reserve, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, we can make those changes. And the Long Beach bike path, yeah, that's historic language. Sorry, go ahead, Terry.
No, there is still actually a legal Long Beach bike path. So the older section that goes from the District of Ucluelet boundary out to where that last piece was just built, it is by bylaw called the Long Beach bike path. So it's divvied up in a whole bunch of ways that are more complicated than it needs to be. But I think we'll leave it for now until maybe we resolve some of the governance issues around it. But thank you.
No, thank you for the clarification that it's that specific section. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. I did have, and it's a larger question, and I'm look maybe over to Daniel on this one. In terms of our terms of reference for the West Coast Committee, we have the ex officio members, but as non-voting members, and I'm thinking about that larger question about our non-treaty nations that are in our area who have been here for thousands of years, and yet as ex officio members on there. And I know structurally it's complicated, but I wonder if you could speak to some of the maybe the initiatives to have a more wholesome voice in these issues that do directly affect many of the communities within our jurisdiction here.
Yeah, I think we're using the tools we have under the existing legislation to the best of our ability. So ex officio is as far as we can go in that area. And beyond that, where we do partner, we partner through service agreements. And the West Coast Transit is actually a great example of bridging that through those agreements. But the work that we've been doing on inclusive regional governance is to do more than just have service agreements. And so what we refer to as having a voice and a vote. So agreements and committees provide a voice, don't provide the vote. And we do see that as a barrier. And actually under UNDRIP or DRIPA, the legislation, it is an actual barrier that the province is seeking to resolve. And we're one of 5 regional districts that's actually set the table and is doing work with treaty and non-treaty nations to try and figure out what aspects of legislation could be changed so that we can have non-treaty nations taking part, if they choose, to regional governance and board activities. And so we already have some recommendations coming out of our work over the last year. But certainly we are requesting additional grant funds to continue the conversation because we've only scratched at the surface. It's taken a few years just to first lobby the province to get some funding. When we got some funding, it took a while to get everyone to the table because everyone's really busy. And then now that we've been at the table and everyone's sort of understanding the value that can be offered, we're actually getting into some really good conversations around things that matter, and not only to the non-treaty nations, but also to regional areas and to the treaty nations. There are elements, and I'll flag a barrier that currently exists even for treaty nations is the recognition of hereditary chiefs. I'll use that terminology for now, but under our legislation, our treaty nations can only appoint to the board elected officials. They cannot appoint hereditary chiefs, which in many cases the nations feel is more appropriate because the elected body tends to be more focused on community, and the hereditary is more attached to the territory and the land as such. And so recognizing that governance difference is really important. And yet, even for treaty nations, we don't do it. And the initial discussions with the province are like, well, that's going to be a lot of change. But in reality, the legislation already accounts for it. And so if we look at regional areas, so for example, Veda for Long Beach Area C is an elected official. But when she appoints an alternative, to her if she were to walk away. That alternate that comes in is actually appointed and not elected, and yet carries all of the authority that Veda would have if she wasn't at the table. So that alternate can vote, can make decisions on budget, can engage the community, and can act as the elected official under our existing legislation. So the legislation already accounts for that, just not for First Nations. And so this is where, you know, some of these discussions would never be occurring if we did not have our tables talking about these barriers and the fact that there actually are some good tools available today. It's not revolutionary change here. We're talking about incremental change. So we hope to get there in the next few years, but we need a good partner being the province. And so far that has been shaping up quite well.
Thank you. And Veda, please go ahead.
I recognize that we have a vote on the floor for the terms of reference, but I'm just wondering if we could consider for another vote that we forward the recommendation from the West Coast Committee to the Inclusive Governments Committee, that they consider what your observations are to change legislation.
So yeah, thank you, Veda. So after this vote that we've got on the table, you'd like to make a motion as to what you just spoke. Would that be, is that what you're, or I could do it?
Chair Steer.
Yes.
I was just going to make another suggestion. As at the last board meeting, I mentioned that we are looking at changes to the procedures bylaw. We could also consider directing this discussion to that table, because there could be changes to the procedures bylaw that affects advisory committees. So either one.
So just so I'm clear on that, what we would do is with this motion that's presently on the table, we would in essence defeat it. And then bring that motion to defer it to the procedures bylaw work that's being done.
Yeah, you actually don't even really need a motion. We are reviewing the procedures bylaw, so I can just make a note to include this discussion as part of that review.
Excellent. So we can adopt the terms as is right now, and then that review will take place, and then possibly next year we may have a look at changes to the terms of reference.
Yeah, maybe we could potentially amend the original motion that Director McEwen made just to make that change to the Pacific Rim name. I can just make that change.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with that in mind, if I'm clear, we can proceed with the motion here, and then you have enough information to take care of the conversation that Veda had brought forward. Does that work for you? Great. So with that in mind, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. I've only had 5 cups of coffee, so I need a lot more clarity on things as it goes. So where are we here on the excellent terms of reference have been completed. So moving on to the agenda, next is another request for decision on the 2025 to 2029 draft financial plan, West Coast Services. I know who's going to be probably presenting on this one, so thank you. There's a lot that will be included here, so please take your time, board, to our committee, sorry, to look into this one.
Thank you. So we will just kind of take each of the West Coast sub-regional services one by one, and I'll do a brief introduction of them. And then we do have Jenny Brunn, General Manager of Community Services, Mark Fortune, Airport Operations Manager, and Eddie Kunderman, Operations Manager, all here to help support these discussions. So we'll start off with the Long Beach Airport. The Long Beach Airport, as we all know, is a challenging airfield to operate. Mark, are you wanting to introduce as you're standing up, or are you just going to answer questions? You want him to introduce it? Is that what you mean? Yeah. No, we'll let Mark. Mark's going to give us the lingo, so we'll go for Mark.
Through the chair, I'll try and stay on track. I'm out of kicking distance, so I should be okay at the moment. So highlights, 2024, we had a very challenging year. We had staffing shortages for leave of absences. We also had a rather significant airside incident or accident with fatalities. And that particular incident, even though it was a bad thing to happen, we responded the best we could with what we had, and we actually had all the resources available to us, which is not usually the case on our site because we look after different jurisdictions. We have airports and water systems. And at that particular time, that particular day, we actually had a full staff complement on site, and that went as good as you could possibly have perceived. So we had a survivor out of that whole incident. The rest of our jurisdictions, fire, ambulance, RCMP, and even Parks Canada, were in abundance. We had an oversupply of manpower, oversupply of resources. It was just great to see, and everything worked really well. Moving forward, the ACRD, we have an MOU with Tloquit First Nation, and that has taken a long time to actually come to fruition. But now that it's installed, it's been fantastic because we have direct representation for all of our decisions, and we have a sounding board that we can go to with questions or queries. And that's worked very well. It's assisted us with OLS cutting permits with Parks Canada, something that a request for a decision or request for an opinion from First Nations that in the past may have taken 6 months, 8 months. We're getting a turnaround in basically 2 days. So the MOU is working fantastic. And that's just going to amplify on projects we have moving forward with their partnership in the airport. Late in October, we had an LPV approach instated by NAV Canada. This is a project we've actually set the framework for, over 10 years ago. It finally came to fruition with NAV Canada redesigning our approaches and changing our approach heights from basically 600 feet down to 250 feet. That means the aircraft can come closer to the ground. It does mean we have to clear trees in our obstacle limitation surface, but having that new instrument approach benefits everybody who uses that airport, be it medevac, be it military, be it our commercial operators. So now on our primary runway, which is the runway that's lit, we have instrument approaches to both ends, and they're down to 250 and 251 feet. And that is basically a game changer for our airport. What it'll do in the future, it'll allow commercial flights that right now, quite often you'll be at the airfield and you'll see a set of landing gear go by in the cloud at 600 feet. Now they'll be able to break through that cloud layer and make an approach, make contact with field and land. So that's a huge improvement. So that happened in October. Late in November, we had a third party that designed and had approved through NAV Canada LPV approaches to the remaining runways at the airfield. So right now we have LPV approaches to every runway, and we also have 3 new departure procedures for every runway at Tofino, which is huge. Now, these all come with a cost, and at present, we don't pay any of those costs at all. The cost for the LPV designed through NAV Canada was provided by NAV Canada because NAV Canada has service charges that are put onto the users of that service. And we have our commercial operations in and out of the airfield that get charged that service, a NAV Canada fee. We also have aircraft going into Tofino, Harbor Air for their seaplane charters. They are using our same approaches. They're getting charged a NAV Canada fee. So all of the annual inspection criteria, all of the 3 or 4 year recertification cycles, all of that is looked after by NAV Canada. The other approaches that we received on Christmas present, December 26th, are supplied by an organization out of Port Alberni that's looking to do charter service into the airfield. They're public approaches. We don't pay anything for them, but they're made public. So now we have the advantage of having numerous approach and departures off of all our runways, which we've never had before. We've also got 2 new departure procedures. So we have a COMOX direct and a CAV2 departure. These will allow aircraft that are usually stuck circling over Barkley Sound. Once we have an aircraft on a departure procedure, they can actually come in on a new procedure, not having to wait for that aircraft to actually clear. So huge improvements from an air navigation standpoint at the airport with basically no cost to us on the ground. It's fantastic. The only difference between the LPVs on our primary and our secondary runway, our primary runway, we have a runway strip, which is wider, and the diversion angle at the end of the approach surface is a bit wider. We've been clearing those trees over, over a decade to those OLS standards, which allows us to get down to 250 feet. Our other approaches are now down to about 500 feet, which is what we're allowed under the restrictions that we have with our runway surface. So even though we're down to 500 feet, it's a huge improvement over what we had in the past. So, and once again, at no cost, because in the past, honestly, when I started with the regional district back in 2000, we had like a $23,000 budget for the airport. And we're supposed to run the airport in $23,000. And so one of the first things we do a land use plan, for the airport. And that was like $20,000. It's like a whole budget of the airport gone in one shot, and mind you, we needed a bunch of other things. So we've come from that to where we are now, and it's looking very good for the future. Something else, revenues, non-tax revenues. I actually didn't highlight this because I didn't think it was that important, but then I was kicked under the table. And $214,000 in 2023, and now we're up to $375,000. This is mostly due to market rate review, which is fantastic. And we have a fantastic opportunity to develop these lands. And long term, I believe that we can make the airport lands self-supporting and actually revenue positive. And we're heading in the right direction. It's just going to take a bunch of baby steps to get there. And we've been doing baby steps for a bit. One of the things I'll talk about really quickly is one of our key capital projects over the last couple of years has been our water fire flow upgrade infrastructure. So we were looking at that as a cornerstone to any future development on the site. Our current system, or our ex-current system, was 1940s cast iron lead pipes, and they were failing left, right, and center. The plan was to update that system so we could actually meet fire flow requirements, which we even have problems in some of our jurisdictions outside of the airport. My fire department had on. Phase 1 was basically replacing all of the underground plumbing, so all new mains. Phase 2 was to basically put in a fire flow pump that would supply required fire flows at the very end of our line. So basically we're looking at about 1,600 imperial gallons a minute. I'm old school, I deal in gallons. Aviation, I deal with feet. I'm not metrified in that sense of the word. But 1,600 imperial gallons, which is fantastic. We did commissioning of the system early in January, and it met and exceeded expectations. It's running perfectly. We also have, as part 3 of this system, backup generation. So the backup generation, when the power goes out at the airport, the water goes out. So now with the backup generation with automatic switchovers, hopefully by the end of or mid-March, we will have the backup generation going. And so when the power goes out for whatever case, we will have water pressure and fire flows available during those periods of non-power. It's a huge step forward. And once again, that's a cornerstone for any future development we want to do on the site. The Hurricane Road development that we currently have in play has a large $1.something million hangar going up, and they require that higher fire flow to run the sprinkler systems. Now they have sprinklers in the building because it's a high risk building housing aircraft. If they didn't have the water capacity to run the sprinkler systems, then they would have to basically add another third onto the cost of the building to put fire breaks in. So because we can offer that higher fire flow rate for sprinkler operations, they're allowed to reduce their cost of construction, which makes it a more viable project for them to move forward. That's not only for larger buildings, such as the large hangars being constructed right now, storage facilities and or even future infrastructure, maybe even terminal buildings that would require fire flows. Now we can supply that. So that's a huge win moving forward. Key projects now moving into 2025. We're going to continue the development of that Apron 2 area, which is the Hurricane Road. We've got airside and non-airside lots. Right now we have 3 subscriptions on that, and we're hoping to get a development person on board our staff, which will help us move that whole project forward as well, both here and in Port Alberni. One of the things that you approved under the PIC was approach light design for $40,000. That's going to be the detailed design of tower locations adjacent to our property. And so we know exactly where they go, so we can deal with National Park if there is an infringement, or if we're working on the boundaries of our lease holding at the airport. We want to know exactly where those towers need to go. The approach lighting is a component. It's basically my last component for the approach on our primary runway. When you discuss approaches with the various operators we have coming into the site, the new limits are great. So we've come down to 250 feet above ground level. We've also reduced that from 1 mile visibility down to, I think it's 3/4. What they don't have is they need an early identification point on the runway to make contact with the field so they continue their approach. So in inclement weather, that's really critical, having approach lighting in play. That's the last piece that we have for our primary runway, is that approach lighting. We have the real estate on the golf course side on the west end of the field. We are tight on the Parks Canada Long Beach parking lot side, and that's what we want to design appropriately so everybody has an idea of where towers would need to go if we move forward with that project. Once again, that project is also the final installation of that project is grant dependent, because it's going to be probably around the 1.5 million range. But we have most of the infrastructure already in the ground with the lighting system. It's a matter of upgrading our lighting system and putting in the approach lighting. Other issues or things we'll be looking at this year, Apron 3, we have a culvert repair that we have to do under our primary runway. We're looking at various options with that right now. I don't have firm costs. We put in budget numbers right now in the budget, but we're just working on finalizing that number. That's kind of a critical one. We're looking at probably doing a drilled culvert. It's going to be cheaper to do a drilled culvert underneath the taxiway to replace it than actually digging up the whole apron and repairing it. And then, as mentioned later on in this, domestic water pump upgrade. So what we found with our new fire pumps, the fire pump is fantastic. We have very old, time expired, basically, domestic water pump system in our current water pump. And when we designed and built the new fire flow pump building, we built it with everything for brand new domestic pumps just to be installed. So all the infrastructure is already in place. We just have to finish the final pieces to put it together, and then we will have one of the better water systems on the West Coast for delivery. Looking forward to that. Terry has been fantastic. Jenny has been fantastic. Daniel, yeah, pretty good. You're pretty good. No, without these staff, I can't get the job done. And I'm more of a, I'm go back to my fire department side of the house. We're here to, get the job done. And there's always little blocks and pieces in the way that we have to sort of navigate around and find which works best. And I can't commend the staff here. They're fantastic. Terry, I have not brought Terry a single treat ever. And she outperforms like every time. I'm like unbelievably happy. We talked about fire flow upgrades. We have interest going back to our terminal building. Our terminal building is new-ish. Our terminal building back, say if you go back to 2005, we had Atco trailers at the golf course. We didn't even have a public washroom on the airfield unless you broke into the weather station. We had a fire on the site. We used money from that fire to build the current structure we have. The current structure was designed for passenger intakes and departures, basically 7 in, 7 out. It works great for that number. Now that we're finding when we have larger numbers of aircraft or people coming in on an airplane where you have 35 in, 35 out, the building does not work. The parking area does not work. And that was identified in basically 2019. We've come up with a scoping project for that new structure. Now we're trying to find grant funding for it. But that is the next pivotal piece in moving the airport forward, is having that actual design in hand so we can actually move forward. And it's one of the limiting factors we have on the airfield right now, attracting newer business into the site. And with that, everything else is there. But we have snow blowers, we have ACAP projects, we have BCAP projects. But I'm open to questions. If you want to throw anything at me, I can try and answer them.
Thank you, Mark. Comprehensive as always. Thank you. And I'll look to Veda. I saw had her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mark, and congratulations on bringing a relic of World War II into a present-day functional airport. You're all to be commended as a group. I think it's amazing. Having worked out at the airport when it was an outhouse place. I did have a question about the approaches. In Port Alberni, there are tree farm licenses on the approaches for Christmas trees, is it a lease that they have? And they're responsible for maintaining a certain height. And I'm wondering if agricultural type interests might be supported on the West Coast in those areas around our airport.
Through the chair, we already have that in play right now with the greenhouses. So the problem is with agriculture and aviation, you don't want to develop a crop that is an attractant to a bird species. So whatever you do from an agricultural standpoint has to be contained or undercover. So what we've done, if you come up Airport Road right now, on the right-hand side, you'll see covered greenhouses, which I think are basically producing lettuce. That's their main cash crop. But we do have an agricultural component already on the airfield. So we have room on the east side, that Airport Road side, for further development, if that is the request in that area. On the west side of the airfield, or the Tofino side of the airfield, we have basically the Long Beach Golf Course. So all of our other approaches are over Long Beach, 2 approaches over Long Beach, 1 over Grace Bay. They're not conductive to putting in a form of agricultural component. So any kind of crop, I classify ourselves as farmers that produce absolutely nothing. So we're out there mowing fields to remove vegetation, to reduce the attractants for hawks and geese. And we're doing nothing with that product that we're cutting down. But that's what was required for us to do to maintain our wildlife management program for the airfield, to reduce, bird strikes and such. Agriculture could be challenging. The thing that we could look at, which I can't say we could look at, cranberries. We have natural cranberries on the airfield. They grow everywhere, but geese love to eat cranberries. So even if you were thinking of putting in cranberry fields, we couldn't support it because it's an attractant. If that makes any sense to you.
Thank you.
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you very much for the report. It's very comprehensive, and congratulations for all the upgrades to the airport, and especially with the planes being able to come below that cloud cover. That's going to make a huge difference for all of us that use the airport to try and get out of town. Thank you.
Thanks, Marilyn. Look up to the thing there. Thank you, Mark. And I will say that the non-taxation revenue was a key component of this conversation. I'm looking over at Jenny because she knows how important that is to this conversation that will commence in terms of the draft budget plan. It is an important piece of that puzzle. But I think what you've articulated, and I think for the room and for those on the West Coast, the service of the airport out there, the improvements that have made. We have an incredibly improved service out there over the several decades that I know we've been involved together. And so I really want to thank you. And we know it's a team effort. And without that work, we couldn't have what I consider a world-class service for a rural small airport. So thank you once again. And I don't know, it's a very small piece of it, but I was just curious, and Terry, I'll look to you in terms of the fees and charges component. The non-revenue from the paid parking, and I know it had a much broader, but it was something that we initiated, and I know it's a very small number, but I was just curious because it was something that I know it had management, be able to control some of the parking issues, not necessarily generating revenue wasn't the key goal, but I was just curious because I didn't see it there specific, and
It is actually lumped into that fees and charges, and I can't actually remote into my own computer today because George is giving me a new computer, which is scary and wonderful all at the same time. But you know what? I will bring that back. When we bring back the next full report of the thing, I'll bring back a whole bunch of discussion that has occurred at these meetings. So I'll bring you back that statistic. But there is definitely some revenue being generated from that. And I think from the opposite side of that, it's actually alleviated some parking issues that were also happening. So it's kind of been a twofold for us as well. But I'll bring that back for you for sure, Director Steer.
great. Thank you, Terry.
If I
Yeah.
can, just really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Really quickly through the chair, Terry's spot on. What was happening on the West Coast was it was becoming a free parking area for your RV, for your car without insurance, for this, for that. And we were having more and more difficulty trying to move these vehicles or having these vehicles moved. So the implementation of the parking fee wasn't to gain revenue. It was to have a tool to vacate the parking lot. We were at a point where we were going to have to build more parking lot because 60% of our parking lot was used up by derelict vehicles or vehicles that were parked there as seasonal vehicles. So the main push was to actually move those along so we didn't have to build more parking space. And I believe we're maybe slightly revenue positive on the parking fee at last count.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, and I know that was one of the big issues that had been identified was the management of those parking spaces, not so much the revenue end, but so it's what I would call a win-win. So thanks so much for that. Without further ado, if there's no other questions, if someone would like to make the first motion for the Long Beach Airport. Thank you, Ada.
I'd like to move that the West Coast Committee recommend the Long Beach Airport proposed budget as presented be included in the first reading of the 2025-2029 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan bylaw.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. I'm going to take a point of privilege and take a 2-minute recess for a bio break, and we'll reconvene here. Let's it's 10:58. Let's convene here at 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Advisory committee, it's a minimum of 4 or something, but yeah, it's interesting because really when
I mean, doesn't take away.
no, it doesn't at all. That's why I wasn't going to interrupt.
Yeah, that's right. No,
But then
when
I
I was
was
reading,
like,
I was like, yeah, okay, yeah.
I was like, we had never, and I seem to remember there was a concern. We were trying to encourage them to come, but at that point it was like a kind of an olive branch and weren't even really sure if they're interested in that being part of the discussion. But if we can fix that, so that was the step.
Agreed.
I can just read what's on there, but
Well, this is West Coast Transit. We thought it was just.
I just thought it was the Terry show.
What page was that there?
She texted me and said it's just
I think next up on the list is West Coast Emergency Coordination proposed budget. Thank you for reminding me all of these. We're not used to pushing the mics. Terry, I think next on the agenda then is the West Coast Committee for the West Coast Emergency Coordination proposed service.
Great, thank you. So this one we're actually winding down. It was a proposed service from beginning discussions back in 2016. I think the emergency managers or the people who are responsible for emergency management on the coast are all quite happy with the informal network that they are continuing to develop and partner on things, and that a formal service is not necessary at this time. So this is a negative requisition. We will be sending the money back. And I know Director Steer had me questioning myself because in the top tables, the negative is quite far on the left-hand side. So it's hard to see that it's attached to the number, but it is money going back in, not the other way around. So we will be negative requisitioning this. There are a couple of the nations and I believe Parks Canada that had actually sent in like $1,000 a piece back in 2018. So we will also be refunding those to the different areas. I think Tokwat, you were one as well. So yeah, just looking for support of this draft service for this budget cycle.
Great. Thank you, Terry. I do appreciate that. Yeah, in conversations with our emergency program coordinator, she concurs with the statements made there. So I'll look to the committee to make the motion.
I can make that motion. I'll move that the West Coast Committee recommend the West Coast Emergency Coordination proposed service budget as presented be included in the first reading of the 2025 to 2029 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan bylaw.
Seconded by Kirsten. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next up on the list is, I believe, the grants and aid.
Great, thank you. So this one's a little bit more challenging for us to set this year because we have the new grant and aid policy that was developed by the board. So historically, of course, we'd seen all the applications. We would discuss amongst ourselves if we wanted to support them or not, and then the committees would pass resolutions. Now we're actually going to be looking at those grant applications in April, I believe. No, the the deadline's April 30th. So we'll be looking at those applications in May. So at this point, we're just looking to set the budgets. So when it came to me setting the budgets, I just picked a number, which was basically the same as last year as a point of discussion. So this is kind of, do you want a pot for West Coast grant and aids? And if so, how much?
Great, thank you, Terry. I'll look to, I will have some comments on this one. I'll look to the committee to see if there's any questions or comments to begin with. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I do like round numbers, so I like the fact that you picked a nice round number of 27,000. So yeah, I'm good with that.
Great, thank you, Marilyn. I'll look to any other questions. Seeing none, I do have a comment on this, and it relates to, once again, if you look at the budget request, and I know this was a preliminary number of 27,000. If you look at the way it's distributed, Tofino Brunt's a very significant share of that total. In fact, almost 3/4. And so the reality for Tofino, we also, in our own grants and aid program, we contribute a sizable amount of money to the West Coast, and specifically within the Tofino district. But that also generates some of the applicants are also regional in nature. I'm going to be looking at reducing that number, or a conversation around reducing what part of that pool we'd be interested. And I don't want to throw out a number out now, but I would look to maybe Terry. I would say from a Tofino perspective, we would be looking at a very minimal number there. If I was to throw out a number, 1,000 would be the number that I would start with at looking at. So it's something that I definitely want to be looked at in terms of coming forward with the draft budget to see where we might place on that.
Sure. Would it be helpful if I just indicated what grants you supported last year through this? Would that be a helpful conversation?
Yeah, maybe for the committee, I do have them written down here, but yeah, certainly for the committee, please go ahead.
Yeah, so last year and every year, obviously they were application based. So every year this number did, especially on the coast, actually kind of fluctuated. It wasn't as consistent as some of our other areas. But last year it was West Coast Community Resources for 5,000, Redfish Restoration for 3,500, Surfrider Pacific Rim for 2,500, Ucluelet Aquarium Society for 10,000, Tofino Arts Council for 2,000, Ucluelet and Area Historical Society for 2,000, and the Tofino Community Food Society for 2,300. So it just gives you an idea of the different ones. So Director Steer, if you were to reduce that, I think maybe one of the effects to these societies is then they would be probably wanting to provide application to maybe both the District of Tofino and the District of Ucluelet separately. And then Director Siga, you will have a budget for Long Beach Area C grants and aids that is separate. So then maybe their application to the regional district becomes solely for Area C, and they're applying directly to those two councils, and then to the Area C director in that manner would kind of be how I would see that look if you decided to reduce that amount for the more sub-regional approach. I do understand the apportionment method is a basis of land and improvements. I think if we were to want to change that, we would actually have to go through like a service establishment, because right now we're using the Local Government Act legislation to do grant and aids with kind of without a service, which isn't something that's common in regional districts. And if we were wanting to do it under a service model and change the apportionment method, we definitely could do that. But there would be some sort of service establishing process we would need to go through to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I could see potentially reducing this number in next year's budget, but Ucluelet, for example, our grants in aid societies have already done their pitch to us and their proposals and spoken to them. And so I feel if this was reduced for this year, some of those societies will be taken aback because they probably planned to approach us as well as the ACRD. And so this would kind of throw them under the bus a little bit for this year, but I could see definitely reducing it next year, just giving the societies more warning that it's coming.
Thank you, Marilyn. And maybe I'll just comment, and I certainly understand and appreciate your perspective, and it would be valuable to give some lead time to some of those organizations that we're looking at potentially. I know that there is some provisions about not double dipping, so those that apply to Ucluelet or potentially Tofino, which we haven't gone through that process yet, they would not be able to apply for some of the potential grants because of that quote double dipping, for lack of a better description. So there, I'm not sure what proportion of those groups would be impacted. I think it stems to a larger issue, and I've had a discussion with staff around, and it's a much broader question, and I don't know if it's the appropriate right here and now, but in terms of when you look at the requisitions, and because of the way that we apportion requisitions, Tofino does bear a significantly increased amount to the taxpayers of Tofino. And so there are limited ways for me to be able to look at the budget and be able to look at an appropriate place for us to make those reductions. And this was one of the few areas that we had the ability to do. That paralleled with the fact that we as a district and municipality, as you know, give a significant portion into a grants and aid through our own program. So with limited abilities, I felt it was my responsibility to be looking at in this one in particular, and there are a number of others that will come up. So I did, I'm going to be, it's going to sound harsh, but I am going to be reluctant to be able. I would like it to be looked at for this budget year to see maybe what that will look like, and when we come forward, maybe Terry can come forward, and we might be able to have at the next go around, maybe have a more fulsome discussion about that reduction. But I do appreciate the perspective, and I certainly understand it. Peter, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just my observation of a typical tourist economy where you have concentrations like Sprout Lake and Tofino, where the property values are spiked because of the tourist economy, and it puts the people living in the communities in a very, very awkward position where it seems like there's a lot of inequity. And I think what we have to recognize with the grants and aid is that this is supporting community life for locals overall. And a lot of like the aquarium, I mean, it's so valuable for all of our schools. And so it does support local well-being, social interaction. But at the same time, it's also a tourist attraction because it was the first saltwater catch and release aquarium in Canada or in the world. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was definitely a feather in the cap of the local communities and economy. So I would hate to see the politics of our changing economy from forestry and fisheries to tourism impact the well-being of our local communities. That's just sort of an observation. So yeah, I'm not sure where I sit with this. And of course, Area C itself has a very little population and could not be contributing, large amounts to these. So just an observation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Veda. And I do appreciate and understand, the importance of community life and the benefits that these organizations bring to the community in terms of the positive contributions. I can think of a number of them, and that's where, it is a very difficult position. Those contributions that the municipality, the district of Tofino does do to our organization, a significant amount of support in those ways and for those exact reasons that you've articulated. So it is a difficult one. But I will go back to having a look at that because of the limited options. I mean, I think there is a false assumption of the wealth in Tofino because of our very high assessed values, and it is a false assumption of wealth within the community and the ability for the individual taxpayer to continue in that way. If you look at the requisitions and the amount that the district of Tofino, just the requisition for the ACRD, it has gone up significantly and has gone up over the years disproportionately. And so it is something that I have to, as my responsibility to the municipality, have to do, and I do it with some reluctance there. That being said, I don't know that the motion that is here. I'm not sure how to amend that. Thank you, Terry.
Um, If I can make a suggestion, I'm thinking that the West Coast Committee recommend that options to reduce the West Coast Grant Navy budget be provided at the March 5th cow.
I will make that motion as presented.
I'll second, but I just wanted to address that double dipping issue. There are societies like PRAS, Pacific Rim Arts Society, that put on 4 different festivals throughout the year. And so they will apply to the District of Ucluelet for one, they'll apply for the District of Tofino for one, and they'll apply for the ACRD for one. So they aren't double dipping because they're asking for funding for specific things like the Missoula Children's Theater, for example. And all of those festivals that PRAS puts on benefits the entire region. And so to surprise them with the fact that they can't apply to the ACRD this year, I think is going to put them in a financial bind. And I just feel for these societies because they operate on a shoestring, many of them, and they rely on the grants and aid to help put these festivals on that actually benefit the whole region. So just wanted to address that double dipping, that they are aware that they can't apply to all 3 for the same thing.
Thank you, Mayor. And they can still apply, though. It doesn't preclude them from applying to the ACRD. It might not be the amount that they were expecting, but they certainly can still apply. But it doesn't prohibit them from applying. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Just a reminder that our new policy did actually remove that double dipping because it got very complicated. And so there will be communication between the different municipalities and the regional district about who's applied for what. But we did actually remove that because it was really hard to determine. Everyone's perception of double dipping was slightly different. So that was removed. And the other just reminder is that this is the max pot that you can allocate. So just even if we do pick a pot, say of $10,000, when you guys actually receive the applications, it does not mean you have to provide out all of the grant money that you guys have provided in the year. That's just going to be the maximum that you're able to provide out. So if you say we went with the $27,000 that's recommended, but you got the applications and felt like you only wanted to support 15,000, we can do that, and then that would become surplus for the following year. So just a reminder that that doesn't necessarily mean that you're definitely handing out that amount of money. It will be at your discretion.
Thank you, Chair. It would make for, a complicated conversation in terms of having a pot there that's not being utilized when you have applications. It would be very difficult for a committee, I think, to say no, and that we're only going to give this much. But I do appreciate and thank you for that option that would be available to us. We do have a motion on the table, has been seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
That we bring it to the COW. Thank you.
Yes.
We can read out the motion.
Yes, that the West Coast Committee recommend that options to reduce the West Coast Grant and Aid budget be provided on the March 5th Committee of the Whole meeting.
I'll call the question then, so that there's clarity on the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? One opposed, motion carried. Yes. Yeah. Kirsten did vote in favor. Great. So as we move down the list here, we have just finished grants and aid. The next on is the West Coast Multiplex Service.
I will speak to that. So in 2024, the West Coast Multiplex Society requested that the ACRD reestablish support for the society. And that's primarily to assist them as they continue their work in 2025 and beyond. Specifically for 2025, they're looking to have a point of contact that would work with them to complete the design of the West Coast Multiplex, to complete the planning work required to get the cost estimates and site prep for site prep and site servicing, to support the coordination of government and agency collaboration, and to support the society as they advance with public and private fundraising campaigns for raising the funds required to build the West Coast Multiplex. There is a service established, but the way it is established is that If the West Coast Multiplex Society builds it, then we will run it. And of course, as we lead up to that, we can collect some funds to do the necessary due diligence. So in order to meet the request, we've included in this financial plan 50,000, but the requisition would only be for 29,722 because there is about 20,000 still left in the pot from previous years. And so we would carry that over and match it with 29. That would be the funds that we'd recommend to allow us to have a point of contact that has the amount of time and resources required to work in a timely way with the society. The way we currently do it is it's on the corner of my desk, and that is not always timely. And so being committed, the budget that we're proposing would allow us to commit somebody in some time.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And I can see smiles in the room, so I think that's well acknowledged. I'll look to the committee to see if there's any questions or comments on this one. Go ahead, Bea.
No comments. It's my understanding that the project does seem like it's moving forward after 50 years of trying to move it forward. Okay, so I would like to read out the motion. The West Coast Committee recommend the West Coast Multiplex Service proposed budget as presented be included in the first reading of the 2025-2029 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan bylaw.
I'll second.
Before I call the vote, I do have comment and maybe a question. One of the things when looking over the proposed budget through 2029, it is just a 1-year 2025 budget request, and seeing that the surplus from that we have had, and that has reduced that 50,000 requisition down. I'm just curious, and I know that we do have someone very closely connected with the multiplex in the room. I'm just curious in terms of the and I don't know if it was a misunderstanding or we as a committee didn't recommend moving forward the longer term conversation around the in the budget process. So we just had it in for the 1 year for 2025, and I don't know if that was an oversight on our part as a board or because that may have been what we said, and I don't know, is there a mechanism for including a requisition amount in the financial plan for those following years?
This service is incredibly tricky based on how it's been set up, because it's set up to operate something only, and we don't have anything to operate. So I feel like we are very close to a line of being a little bit offside. And so I feel that it's more appropriate to take on a year-by-year basis, because we have to do our due diligence and we have to support the society, because we wouldn't want something to be built that we don't want to take over, because that is kind of the agreement. So there is some role, but I think that we have to make sure that there's progress towards the construction and the building in order to be able to continue to support it, because otherwise I feel like we're a little bit getting close to that line of, are we actually operating something that doesn't actually exist? So from a CFO perspective, I'm more comfortable taking it year by year, maybe just with like verbal understanding that as long as there's progress towards construction that we're able to support it. But it is tricky. Like I don't feel like that can be like a never ending pot for us, because there isn't something to necessarily operate.
Thank you, Terry. I think that's good clarification and understanding. And as our CFO, we rely on you for that information. So thank you. I do appreciate that clarification. So we do have a motion on the table. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next up, I should look here so I believe it is the transit service.
Oh, and I left it green. So 2024 really saw, as we've talked about, and Seth was here to present, and thank you, Seth, was really focused on the start and implementing of the ACRD run transit service. So we were able to get the wheels turning in April. There were some challenges throughout the year, as we all know. I think we were able to address those as the year went on. We were able to put some financial ramifications as far as not meeting certain standards of service delivery within the contract. And we saw over the last couple months, service reliability has been back up to where we want it to be. Of course, there were some challenges. We saw revenue collection in 2024 was $38,000 over the 9 months of service. So we extrapolate that to approximately $50,000 over 12 months of service. So we're looking for an increase, hopefully, in 2025. With BC Transit coming on board as well in 2025, we have a bunch of improvements. So we see the annual service hours increase from 5,700 to 7,500. 2 additional trips per day, longer service span. I think we have the real-time locations, the brand new buses, the cash fares, the UMO app. All these things will be improvements to the service. I think where we're really hoping to go and just get that rider reliability and to have passengers being able to rely on the service again. So I think as we start it and as we've gone over the past couple months, that service reliability has increased. With BC Transit coming on board, I think that will only continue to increase and increase moving forward. So as we look towards the budget this year, we see a full year of service in 2025 as compared to 9 months in 2024. So we do see a 24.38% increase in the tax requisition. So that kind of reflects that full year of service. Moving to BC Transit. Staff are also proposing the development of a West Coast Transit Committee to facilitate discussions with municipalities, First Nations, and other interested parties to really inform the direction of the service moving forward. We have been relying on the West Coast Transportation Working Group, which has been fantastic, and thanks to Marcy DeWitt for leading that and really being a huge proponent for the service, and we wouldn't be where we are without her hard work. But we're looking to kind of take that off the side of her desk and help her out. The proposal of the committee will allow us to get some administrative support from the ACRD as well, which will be a help. Another project as we look towards 2025 is we are looking grant dependent on bus shelter installations throughout the system. So this will be another area where the committee can come together and inform where, how, when these installations will take place. So yeah, that is the West Coast Transit Service. And happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. I'll look to Marilyn, go ahead, please.
Thank you. There was a briefing note that one of the current bus drivers set out, and I did forward that on to Marcy. I guess we'll probably talk about that at the West Coast Transit meeting at noon. But just because we have Mark here in the room, one of the suggestions was that the bus actually go to the airport, because right now it's dropping people with their luggage on the highway, and they have to walk all the way up that road to get to the airport. So just hoping that might be an improvement that we might see.
Yeah, and through the chair, and thank you for that point. The question was raised, and we had a conversation with Mark on it in fall of 2024. We were just getting too close towards the start of service and the transition for the BC Transit to make the changes for this year. It is something as we move towards the future in 2026 that we are definitely looking towards having that improvement made.
Great, thank you.
Look up to the rest of the committee if there's any questions. Comments? No. Just thank you, Eddie. Just a quick one. I know some of the issues that previous, and we do have Seth in the room as well. Some of the questions that had come up around labor and reliability of service, and some of the issues that had come up. Once again, we the operator that we have in there, and I'm just curious in terms of those labor issues, and I certainly we've already heard, attracting workers to the coast. I'm wondering, other than we have a full complement of drivers, it sounds like, in a contract, I suspect that's been established there. There was a question from my community on one of the transit users around unions and are these all unionized employees that the drivers and maybe in extension the mechanic, but I'll start with the drivers.
Yeah, and through the chair, it's a good question. At the onset, they were not unionized. I know there's been discussions and chats about that process taking place. I'm not sure if you have any update on that, Seth, as far as PWT and the transit drivers being unionized.
Just offer that the drivers in our other Vancouver Island system, with only 1 or 2 exceptions, are union members, and in Port Alberni they're union members. So I believe there were conversations about whether they would join the Unifor contract out of Port Alberni, but don't have an update on where that conversation is at currently.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And that was obviously in terms of those reliabilities of service and all those are some of the questions that had come out. So thank you. We do have, unless I'll look up to make sure I'm not missing, if there are no other questions or comments, who would like to make this motion? Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you. I will move that the West Coast Committee recommend the West Coast Transit Service proposed budget as presented be included in the first reading of the 2025 to 2029 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan Bylaw.
Seconded by Kirsten. I think I saw her hand up there. Thank you. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Motion carried. I'll get that thing clicking here soon. The last one, Jenny walking up to the podium. Of course, I'm not going to have favorites out here, but one of my favorites is the Waste Management Service contract here. Please go ahead, Jenny.
Thank you. And who doesn't love garbage? So this is a good news story because we've done nothing but expand service in waste over the last little while. So we've added 3-stream collection. We've expanded that into our First Nation communities. We have had grant funding to fund the expansion of services at the landfill itself. So that's meant we do organic processing, and we have upgraded the tipping area so that we have more diversion streams. And this has paid off. We've seen our diversion rates increase, which has been lovely. We've also started taking biosolids this last fall. So we now have biosolids from the Tofino wastewater plant coming to the site. So this has been an incredible amount of change just operationally for this service. So what we're seeing is for 2025, our focus is really going to be trying to look at those operations and make sure we're running them as efficiently as possible. We also need to update our design, operation, and closure plan because this is a guiding document for the landfill, and it really guides exactly how we're operating, literally filling the cells, covering them, looking to the long term to make sure that we're building the landfill back end, as well as managing the leachate effectively. So our last DOCP was in 2012, and it is well outdated, but we wanted to make sure that we had made the changes before we updated the plan. Just succession properly. The other great thing that's been happening has been the solid waste management plan engagement. So we finished the second phase of engagement in the fall, and we had really good turnout on the West Coast, as we always do. And we have really gotten a lot of information out of the work done to date. So we have a good understanding of the guiding principles, which is really the bigger picture, what our targets and goals need to be. And we've talked with the community about 8 different strategies. And so it's been incredibly informative. We will have a detailed report coming back to Committee of the Whole in early March, and we'll talk more about that and what we want to do for next steps to make sure that we're really setting a plan forward to keep building on the success so far. So that was a lot of excellent work that we've done. The downside, I would say, or the risk side with solid waste is that solid waste, and one of my concerns is that solid waste is so directly tied to the economy. And we're looking forward to a very uncertain economic future in the next year. So when we've been doing this budget, it's been as conservative as we possibly can, but we have a lot of uncertainty. So this landfill is a high cost service. All of the things that we do is very high cost for a small population. And that is just proportionally different than, say, the Alberni Valley and Bamfield. And we have a lot more comfort level there just because of the number of people paying into the service. This is similar with a lot of the West Coast services, but in particular with the West Coast solid waste. So we're not planning to make any significant changes. You'll see we haven't recommended any major tax increases. It's been very modest. But when we do finish, I guess this is more maybe a warning to you guys to know for next year. When we do finish our design, operation, and closure plan, that's probably going to be looking at some of those capital investments. And we can use our solid waste management plan to help us get grant funding for that. And we have been successful with the strategic priorities, and hopefully we will. But I do see us trying to find more sources of revenue, whether that's taxes or other user fee systems. And I mentioned when we did the initial presentation at the board that one thing that was highlighted for us on the West Coast in particular is the commercial stream. So we've done a really good job with the residential stream and having those 3 separate carts at the road, but we think there's a lot of opportunity where we can improve on the commercial side. So we're going to be coming back to talk to you as the year goes on, looking at different systems. We might be looking at different rates for commercial to both incentivize them to divert more, but also as a source of revenue for us. And maybe we'll be looking at, we just talked grants and aid, but we could be looking at programs where we can increase those garbage tipping fees and then invest back into some commercial businesses in order to help them divert more. So there's many ways that we can sort of manipulate, encourage, support people to do the right thing, but then also support the financial sustainability of the service for the long run. We're going to be doing power upgrades. That'll be one of the things, and some minor, again, changes at the landfill site just to improve operational efficiency, and in an effort to, if anything, run things as cost effectively as possible. So we have a heightened awareness around this service, and we're trying to do our best for you. And we don't have much really changes for this year for you. If you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll look to the committee to see if there are. Go ahead, ma'am.
Question not really relating to the budget, but could we have another tour of the landfill? It's one of my favorite things to do.
Absolutely not. Yes, we would love to do a tour. Let's wait till it stops raining. And so we'll plan something for spring.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Daniel, please.
Can I just add, when you talk about the power upgrades, again, like I think our approach to doing that has been quite good in that we're partnering with a commercial partner in order to achieve that. So rather than a direct tax increase, we're working with the public sector to actually, foster, recognize, and work with their investments so that the taxpayer isn't left on the hook completely on their own. And perhaps can we expand on that, or?
Certainly. So as you may remember, we have Rogers who have installed a cell phone tower on the site. I actually think you might have noticed that you have better cell service recently. And with that, we have a lease agreement that we've negotiated. And one of our challenges is the capital reserve. And so we've worked with them to basically come up with a financing model. So we're sharing those costs, but they're also doing the work, and we're just doing it as a rent credit on their lease. So we're not having to finance that. So it's working out very well, as Daniel points out, one of those partnerships that's been very effective for us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And get any questions, comments, or look up to the board.
Just thank you so much for all of the effort to acknowledge that, it's difficult to balance meeting the needs of the population with tax increases.
Great, thank you. You've heard me go on ad nauseum probably about the program and everything that's been involved, but I do want to touch on just a couple of things. And I think, you identified, and it was one of the comments here, but, in terms of our solid waste management plan, and I have to say the incredible work that's been done by staff there, having been directly involved in the committee, the advisory committee, I can speak and attest to the work and dedication that's gone into that, especially around the public engagement component and receiving that input. One of the areas that consistently comes up, and you identified, is we've done a great job within our jurisdiction on the residential component. Somewhat outside of our direct control is the ICI component of that. We're talking about some of the biggest contributors that we have there. And those, and then just in the very last, you talk about those partnerships that have allowed us to reduce costs to the taxpayer as well as meet the service needs that we have. And I'm wondering, I'm sure you have, but maybe in terms of those potential partnerships within the private sector in that area, is there anything currently underway, or is there some thought processes in those potential relationships to the biggest contributors in that particular area?
Yeah, we're working with all of our partners. So Surfrider has been phenomenal over the years. They've developed the ocean-friendly certification for businesses, which has a strong waste component. And so they work with businesses individually and get them to come up with their own plan of what they're going to do to reduce their waste. That is one key component that's been successful. We want to keep building on that. We actually are hoping to export it to the Alberni Valley. The model is wonderful. The other one is working with our waste haulers. So that is ACRD Environmental. And we talk with them on a regular basis because it really is the haulers can be key in making the changes. So we stand at the landfill when it comes to commercial because we don't control the pickup for commercial. So we can implement different rates and regulations for the landfill, but working with our haulers to make sure that those are translating into changes at the pickup. And so that can be key. We're doing that in the Alberni Valley, but as well, we'll be continuing to work on that on the West Coast. But the biggest thing we do is if we can create a financial incentive that will encourage people to use other streams and to divert more into organics because it just makes sense money-wise, that can be the motivating factor. I have to tell you though, we struggle as much as I think everyone on the West Coast does with the tourists because the commercial sector is actually a lot of tourists. And so getting them to use a system that cleanly diverts materials is forever on our how do we succeed? And we've been looking around the province where we're continuing to investigate that ourselves and we're going to keep working on that. It's not easy because it's just one of our biggest challenges. So we're going to keep working on that with our educator, with Surfrider, with the businesses and resorts. And at the end of the day, I think that there just needs to be a cost to, because really each and every resort has to retrain new staff every summer and get them to use the waste system and then educate a client that's only there for a day or 3 days. Like it's an infinitely difficult challenge. So we will continue to work with them and we'll be looking at our education program and seeing what we can do this year and build for a really successful plan for the future specific to the West Coast, which has this very unique challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. And I saw our president of the chamber perk up. So I think there's we have an excellent relationship at the municipal level, and I'm certain that reach out from the regional district would be well received. I have just a very technical question. Well, not that technical. In one of the and I was just curious in the budget process under consultant costs in 2025 there was a bit of a jump there at 73,000 and I just didn't know what that was for when I was thinking of all the stuff and I was just curious as to what that roughly 50,000 increase in consultant costs was for that 1 year, just for the 1 year.
Design, operation, and closure plan, the DOCP.
Thank you. Awesome.
That's
I had that in the back of my mind. And then just one last one. Throughout conversation since I've been involved, and it's one that I know has a very high capital cost end to it is the leachates and the work. And now I haven't seen that articulated within the budget, and I'm just wondering maybe if we could have an update on where we might be at with that.
Yes. So a number of years ago now, we did conceptual design for a leachate upgrade because some of the problems that we have on the site is we have really high rainfall. And so we get overflow events and the current leachate system. So that's not meeting our criteria in our operating permit. So we had investigated that. The cost came in at $2.4 million. And so we still have that in sitting there and the conceptual design, which requires a few steps to move forward. But the design, operation, and closure plan will be the thing that's going to relook at that. And the reason we want to relook at that is because of the high cost and because of all the other things we're worried that, not worried, but we can foresee having to do in order to, address some of the expanded scope and service that we're providing there. And we want to investigate other options. So can we reduce the cost of that leachate upgrade by diverting stormwater? So can we have a different filling plan and operation plan for the landfill itself to keep the water from coming in? So then that's the way we solve that. We have challenges with clean water on site. So, do we then set up basically a lake in which can be our water source versus extending out to get water service from the road? So we've got a number of issues that we would like to look at from a holistic perspective and work with our operator, work with a really good design engineer, and then just come up with something that's going to work, because I think that cost is so key for this system for the future, that it has to be paramount in what we're designing. Because yes, we need to meet the regulations, we need to protect the environment. We have all of these needs, and finances has to be one of those considerations as well.
Thank you, Jenny. I do appreciate that. And, you know, there's a certain irony with, in terms of the revenues that you generate, we want to incentivize less tipping coming in, which affects our revenues. And so it is a challenge that I'm glad that's your challenge. Because I don't know how. So thank you so much for that. There is a recommended motion, and maybe I'll look to Marilyn. Thank you, please.
Thank you. I will move that the West Coast Committee recommend the West Coast Waste Management Service proposed budget as presented be included in the first reading of the 2025 to 2029 Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Financial Plan bylaw.
Great. Seconded by Kirsten. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. We got through the budget part of it. Moving on to reports, we have the Area C South Long Beach Official Community Plan update. And
I wasn't sure who was presenting that one today, but I can certainly speak to some of the details. So we have been working on the Area C plan update for quite some time. Staff did put together a plan for moving forward that includes engagement with First Nations, setting different tables, and they have been reaching out for that, as well as a number of community outreach ongoing community outreach initiatives. We have done some in 2024. I think recently, the most recent one was we had a booth set up at the local co-op, and just getting input from different individuals going to the co-op. And we've also taken part in some online surveying activities. We intend to continue down that path in 2025 and bring forward various summaries so that we can hone in and identify those key priorities that we have for the official community plan in this area. Now, I will flag that in the official community plan, what we do not have is the airport lands. So, and it has come up quite often where people say, well, what about those airport lands? And that's a good question. What about them? The airport lands fall in a slightly different category, and so they are not considered at this time under the OCP in the same way that we would want to discuss them. So a side table is being set, and a separate budget is what we would want to establish in order to do an airport plan on its own. And that's something that we would apply for a grant, and we would primarily start by setting a table with Clayoquot under our MOU to talk about the long-term uses at the airport, and then we would come back for some community engagement and finalizing of that separate plan. So it does seem a little disjointed, and it does confuse a lot of people, but the way the airport has been set up historically and the way it currently sits is that it has not been part of the OCP and is still not part of that OCP. So we're talking about uses everywhere but. It doesn't mean that we won't take comments from the public and then set those comments to the appropriate table, but it just does mean that is a gap that everyone has noticed, and we are acutely aware of it, but we are following a separate process for those lands.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And it was in big letters, airport lands question mark. So thank you. You answered the question. I'll look to the table, to the committee here. Go ahead, Beta.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we did just have an APC meeting last night, and there was lots of discussion about the document that has already been produced, and congratulations to whoever contributed to that, because they have pulled in pretty much every issue I can think about in terms of the future development of the area in terms of the official community plan. What they're seeking now is more public input to shape the values and the direction for the future. what are the priorities of the local residents? And it's really important to get that feedback in there instead of letting the OCP get solidified and then you're dealing with issues that you don't that you should have had voice in but didn't. So I would really encourage anybody on the whole West Coast to have a look at the opportunities for input into the official community plan that are available through the website. And you can win a pizza party if you should so desire to put your input in. So yeah, looking forward to more input and thoughts from residents on how they want to shape the future of Area C. Thank you.
Just a question for Veda. Are you looking for input just from Area C residents or from the West Coast residents?
That would be a question I'll have to direct to staff because I was unclear.
We would like comments from everyone. And so when people complete a survey or provide comments, we do often ask if they're comfortable sharing where they're from so that we can better assess where that information is coming from. But an official community plan really helps us gear that long-term vision. And if we think of some of the more recent examples that we just used today, so Rogers setting up a tower at our solid waste area allows us to share resources, partner, and reduce cost of taxation, and also reduce costs for the private partner. So when I'll relay that back to the OCP because when the community on the West Coast talks about where they would like to see things taking place or what things should be taking place, and then we talk about where, it helps us coordinate effort. And when we coordinate effort, we do see savings, and those savings are win-win. They help business and they help taxpayers. When we don't coordinate, we see the classic sprawl example, and sprawl is expensive in every possible way. Sprawl makes it more expensive for transit because you have to have more stops and more diverted areas. Makes it more expensive for power and water because you've got to run pipes further in longer areas that are more remote. It really makes things challenging and coordination even more challenging. So even though we have the challenges we have today, the reality is the more we coordinate on a vision and the more we have these discussions before breaking ground, the easier it is for us to do so effectively. And that's a win-win. The other, when I refer to these side tables that are being set up in collaboration with the nations, is that our nations on the West Coast also have visions. Now, some of that is on treaty land and off treaty land. But there again, dialogue and coordination is so important because if we can collaborate with each other, understanding that if you're running a water line and all we need is a 4-inch, but if we had a conversation with Tokwat or with Utlulasaf and we said, well, is there a vision later on? Maybe that 6-inch is an 8-inch, and we're collaborating on a grant together to upsize and bring that forward. And on the long term, that's a saving. So there's a reason for it, and there's a reason for the discussion, and it does take time and it does take money to have that discussion, but the quality of the end product depends on how people take the time to engage with that as well. And there's nothing worse than having a handful of people put a lot of time and then the majority comes in afterwards and say, well, hold on, we weren't included. So this is your moment to be included. And when your voice is heard, it helps us with all that coordination early on so we can make sure that we're hitting those right priorities.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that explanation and the importance of this point in time in terms of getting your input in. Just an example of what came up at the APC meeting is people who are living in areas that are accessed through logging roads. The logging roads are now becoming privatized land. And so this presents a problem for access to some properties. So considering residents within the Area C this is important, but it also has impacts for fire, safety, emergency. It's brought up in our meetings continuously for not only West Coast communities, but communities across the whole of our Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. So that's just one example. Yeah, a lot of things that were brought forward are like, well, this isn't just Area C, but the idea is get the vision down collaboratively so that we're moving together forward. Another one that was brought up was why aren't we building infrastructure in non-inundation zones for the tsunami, right? Why don't we have our industrial areas up and away in areas that are not going to be taken out if a tsunami should come? And that also presents opportunities for, you're going to need water systems for this new industrial area. Does that not provide better water access for our own communities at some point? Because you've got a collaboration of finances to build it. So lots to think about, lots to contribute. Please do contribute. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. A few areas that came to my mind. One was Salmon Beach. When we first started talking about a transit system, Salmon Beach residents, I remember, were up in arms because most of them, all of them are recreational properties. And so the survey that went out in the winter, and a lot of those people don't live there in the winter. And so I remember being at a meeting where there was some disappointment by Salmon Beach residents that they had not been communicated with. So that's an area maybe to pay a little attention to, and also maybe reach out to UMBA, the Ucluelet Mountain Bike Association, because they're building trails all over there for mountain biking, and the Barclay Community Forest as well is looking at building mountain bike trails. So maybe another area to reach out to.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. And look up to see if there's any. Just a quick comment for myself. I think that, Daniel, you're pointing out the importance of why we have an ACRD, why we have a regional approach to many of these issues, and so that once again is clarified. When I looked at the expected OCP topics, there were over 20, and it says here, and not limited to. So the recognition that many of those topics overlap throughout the region, and so the importance of that engagement with the communities that reside out here in those inputs in. So as Veda said, we'll work hard to have as much participation in those conversations as we can through our areas. So thank you for that. And I think there is a motion on the table. Veda, if you would, you got it in front of you there, if you would like to read it out, please.
I'd like to move that the West Coast Committee receive the Area C South Long Beach Official Community Plan update as presented. And
I'll second.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'll call the question. Thank you, Marilyn. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. Next on there for reports was the Long Beach Airport Water Systems Improvement Investment Update. I think Mark gave us a great, and the report was very clear. It was an excellent, very clearly laid out. If there is any questions, I'll look to the committee if there is. Otherwise, thank you, Mark. Appreciate all of the work on that, and the phasing in and very clearly articulated. We got phase 4 coming up here in 2025. We've got a budget allocation to that. The work is ongoing and moving forward. Next on the, if I should look, if there were any questions, seeing none, I'll move on to our ex officio members update. And I see Dave up there, and thank you for hanging in, Dave. Appreciate that. I'll look up there to see if you've got an update for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Noticing the time, I'll try and keep this quick. I've got three quick items. So first one is I want to thank the ACRD staff and Daniel and Jenny and all the staff. We entered in a 5-year lease with 2 properties in the airport lands, and had a lot of discussion with the colloquiate and your staff. So we appreciate that, and that has now been signed off. Number 2 is just an update on our Pacific Rim National Park Reserve Management Plan. So as I've shared before, we're co-developing this with 9 First Nations. For the Long Beach unit, we've just completed the discussions on the state of the Long Beach unit. So we'll be finalizing the framework and then pushing that up through the government leadership from all nations and Parks Canada. And then we will be having public consultations on kind of scoping and what kind of the priorities will be for the management plan. It's a unit-based approach. So for this board, I'm talking primarily about the Long Beach unit, but of course it will be for all 3 units. So there will be more information going out to communities and the public and districts and leadership on that consultation, but I'm thinking that would be kind of later 2025, so maybe late summer or fall, but I don't want to put an exact date on it. And then the third one is just an update. I'm not sure if I've updated the board on this one, is the National Marine Conservation Area Reserve. So Parks Canada and 12 First Nations, we're looking at creating a memorandum of understanding on a feasibility assessment for a National Marine Conservation Area Reserve on the Vancouver Island shelf. So this conservation area reserve could go all the way up, all the way up the coast of the way past Pacific Rim waters. So it'll go kind of all up the west coast of Vancouver Island. So far, we have 9 of the 12 nations that are interested, have signed off on those MOUs, and we're just waiting for the other 3, and then we'll kind of go with the next step. So I just wanted to make sure everyone at this meeting was aware of that process as well. And that's it, Chair, if there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Dave. That is a very exciting work that's being done on those conservancy areas. I'll look to the committee if there's any questions or comments from them. Seeing none, I think we have on the agenda our nation representations, ex officio members, and I'll look over to, I'm not sure who's on the line, I can't see. Heather, is from anyone from House It online with us?
No, there's no other ex officio members online.
Thank you, Heather. Then I won't go through the other 3. With that, I'll move from the chair that the West Coast Committee receive the verbal reports. Seconded by Veda. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carried. I'll look to Heather. I don't believe there's any late business, but I will look. And since there is nobody participating on question period, I'll look to the gallery to see if there's any questions from the gallery. And while she's checking, and I have Samantha Hackett, you win. Excellent. Thank you.
Amazing. Samantha Hackett with the West Coast Multiplex Society. I'm the chair, and I have Carrie, one of our other volunteer board members. Just a question on when you were going through the budget and to the staff report, just about, it was noted for the West Coast Multiplex service that it was a consultant. So we're just wondering what that sort of looked like, or was there a vision for that, of what that relationship looked like? Obviously, I know we can probably do some of the chat offline, but just sort of a general thing for the public meeting and for the directors, and then also just a thank you for putting it in and the support, and we're looking forward to whatever that does look like.
Through the chair, that will likely be a mix of staff and consulting. So, and we'll iron out those details once the budget's approved. Then we'll sit down and chat about your plan, when things are occurring and when resources would be required. But certainly a portion of that is staff. And what I will probably be tasked with is figuring out which staff is most appropriate, and making sure that we carve out that time. So I'm going to need to coordinate with you to make sure that we can establish a schedule.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate coming in and sticking with through the whole meeting. We don't have an in-camera agenda, so as the prerogative of the chair, I will adjourn this meeting at 12:02. Wow, look at that, eh? We're a little 2 minutes to head over to another meeting here. So thank you, everyone, staff, for coming out to the West Coast today. Much appreciated. Am I missing anything, Heather?
We're all good, thank you.
I'm all good, thank you.